I moved into the neighborhood just a few weeks ago. Nice place. Quiet streets, trimmed hedges, overly friendly HOA emails. You know the type. It wasn't the kind of place I expected drama. Honestly, I wasn't even home most days to notice anything wrong. I kept to myself, paid my dues, and didn't bother anyone. That Sunday was the first time I'd had a proper day off in weeks, so I figured I'd do something normal, grill some food in my backyard, maybe crack open a cold drink, and just enjoy the sun for once. The smell must have traveled because not 15 minutes in, I saw someone lingering near my fence, a teenager, maybe 19 or 20, pale, lanky, wearing one of those smirks that said he thought the world owed him something. I gave him a nod. He didn't nod back. Instead, he walked right up, leaned on the fence like it was his own porch, and without even saying hello said, "What you cookin'? Smells good. Let me get a plate." I was caught off guard, not because he asked for food. I've shared meals with strangers before, but because of how he asked. Like he was entitled to it. Like I was standing behind a counter not in my own backyard. I said, "Sorry, man. This is just for me today." Still polite, still trying to keep it neighborly. But his face twisted instantly. He scoffed and said something under his breath. Then louder, figures, then louder, figures. You people always got an attitude. And that was the moment I knew this wasn't just some rude kid. This was deeper. His tone, the way he looked me up and down, like I didn't belong in that house, on that street, in that zip code. He stormed off before I could even respond. I figured that was the end of it. 5 minutes later, I heard heels clicking on concrete, fast, angry. A woman, mid-40s, blonde, visor on, each to her shirt like it was a sheriff's star, marching across my lawn like I just kicked her dog. She didn't knock. She didn't knock. She didn't ask. She didn't ask. She just started yelling. "Did you refuse to give food to my son? He said you were being aggressive." I didn't even get the chance to answer before her phone was already in her hand. She was dialing 911 right there in front of me, turning to the side like she was giving an Oscar-worthy performance. An Oscar-worthy performance. "Yes, I'm here at address." A man is acting threatening and aggressive in front of my home. He's refusing to leave. I hadn't even left my backyard. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I knew how this game played out. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, is that I don't just pay taxes in this country, I serve it. And I don't just protect my community, I'm authorized to. So I waited, calmly, didn't say another word. The patrol car pulled up, lights flashing, but no siren. I recognized the officer. We trained together once years ago. He stepped out of the vehicle, saw me, and his whole expression changed. "Hey, what's going on here?" he asked. Karen didn't even let him finish. She launched into her story, all about how I barged onto her property, how I intimidated her son, and how I refused to leave. He let her finish. Then he turned to me. That's when I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my badge. Slowly, deliberately, I flipped it open and held it up. Karen froze, completely. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her son, standing behind her, turned pale. All that arrogance, gone. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The look on her face, the shift from smug entitlement to pure panic, said it all. The officer gave me a small nod. He asked me to step aside for a second. We spoke quietly, professionally. Meanwhile, Karen was pacing, nervous. She knew this wasn't going to go the way she planned. The story she told, it was starting to unravel. Because now it wasn't just a scary man on her lawn. It was a federal agent standing calmly in his own yard, being harassed in front of witnesses. And that's when everything shifted. The officer walked back toward her, asked her a few pointed questions. She started backpedaling, and maybe I overreacted. It was just a misunderstanding. My son didn't mean anything by it, but it was too late. The damage was done. Ask ChatGPT when I first moved into the neighborhood, I didn't expect much more than some nosy neighbors and the occasional lawn complaint. You know the type, the ones who glare through their blinds if your trash bins aren't tucked in before sunset. I'd been warned about the HOA here. Strict. Overbearing, a little too interested in everyone's business. But I figured as long as I stayed respectful and minded my own, I wouldn't have problems. That theory lasted about 3 weeks. I'd finally gotten a Saturday off, a miracle in itself. The sun was out, the breeze was right, and I decided to fire up the grill. It wasn't anything fancy. Just some chicken, a few vegetables, and the peace that comes with a quiet afternoon. Music was playing low in the background. I had a drink in hand, and I was finally starting to feel like maybe this neighborhood could be home. That's when I heard footsteps coming down the side of the house. I turned, thinking maybe it was the neighbor dropping by to say hello. But instead, it was a young man, tall, maybe early 20s, with that look some people wear when they've never been told a no in their life. He didn't smile, didn't greet me, just walked straight up to the edge of my patio and said, "Yo, you cooking for everyone or just yourself?" I blinked. Not because he asked, but because of the way he asked. Like I owed him something, like I was working a grill for the whole block and forgot to notify him. I tried to keep it cool. "Just me today," I said, smiling. I didn't realize I had company coming. He looked at the food, then back at me. Come on, man, hook me up with a plate." Again, I told him no, politely, firmly. That should have been the end of it. Instead, he laughed in that mocking, slow way people do when they're trying to make you feel small. "Typical," he muttered, shaking his head. "You people always act like you're better than everyone." That phrase, "you people," it hit hard. Not because I hadn't heard it before, but because it always came laced with the same condescension, the same quiet hatred. And he didn't say it under his breath. He said it loud enough for the wind to carry. Then he turned and stomped back toward his house, which I realized sat just across the street. I figured that was the end of it. I didn't want trouble. I wasn't about to escalate something over grilled chicken. But 10 minutes later, I saw her. His mother, walking toward me like a storm cloud in white sneakers and pastel activewear, hair pulled back tight, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. I'd seen her before, the kind of neighbor who always had a clipboard, always had a complaint. She didn't even introduce herself, just stepped onto my driveway like it belonged to her and said, "Oh, did you just insult my son?" I was confused. "Excuse me?" "He said you yelled at him," she said, arms crossed. "That you cursed at him and threatened him over some food." I blinked. That's not true. "He came into my yard and you don't care what your version is." She cut me off. "You don't talk to people like that around here. This is a family neighborhood." Before I could respond, she was already dialing. I didn't even have time to ask who she was calling before I heard her say into the phone, "Yes, I'd like to report an aggressive man on my street. He's acting erratic and threatening." I looked around, half expecting someone else to be there. But no, it was just me, standing on my own property. With a plate of food in one hand and a neighbor slandering me to 911 with the other. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I just watched. Within minutes, the patrol car pulled in. The officer stepped out, hand near his holster, eyes scanning the scene. Karen, I didn't know her name, but she was definitely a Karen, launched into her performance. "That's him. That's the man. He came at my son, was yelling and threatening, and refused to leave." I stayed quiet, calm. Then I pulled out my wallet, flipped it open, and held up my badge. "KP." The officer froze for a second, looked down, then back at me. His tone changed instantly. "Yes, sir," he said. "Would you mind stepping over here for a moment?" I nodded. I knew how these things went. We spoke briefly. I explained what happened. The officer sighed and nodded. He could already tell what kind of situation this was turning into. Meanwhile, Karen was watching us closely, her face shifting from righteous fury to confusion. Then concern, then something close to fear. Her son had stepped outside by then, too. His face had drained of color. They both just stood there, realizing that whatever they thought was about to happen wasn't going to go their way. The neighborhood looked perfect on the outside. Clean sidewalks, identical mailboxes, well-manicured lawns that made it feel like you were walking through a catalog. But behind all that symmetry, all that polite waving and edges, there was something else. Something that didn't show up in brochures or welcome packets. I learned that the hard way, and it started with something as simple as me cooking lunch. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where the breeze is just enough to keep you outside a little longer, and the sound of birds almost drowns out the stress of the week. I had the grill going, a few burgers and chicken on the flame, and was looking forward to eating in peace. I wasn't bothering anyone. My music was low, my yard was clean, and for once I was actually enjoying my new home. That was until I heard the voice from the side gate. I turned around, surprised. A young man I'd never seen before was standing there, tall, wiry, with a baseball cap turned backward and a smirk that told me this wasn't a friendly drop in. I didn't say anything at first, just tried to place where he even came from. He leaned against my fence, arms crossed like he had a right to be there, and nodded toward my grill again. I'm serious. You got plenty. Just hook me up with a plate. Sorry, man. It's just for me today. His whole face changed. That smirk disappeared and something uglier replaced it. He laughed, not because anything was funny, but because he couldn't believe I had the audacity to say no. Of course, he said. A figure someone like you wouldn't know how to be neighborly. I paused. That phrase, as someone like you, it hit harder than any insult. Not because I hadn't heard it before, but because I knew exactly what it meant, and so did he. He wanted me to respond. He wanted a reaction. But I wasn't going to give him one. I turned back toward the grill, ignored him, and figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. 5 minutes later, his mom showed up, marching down the driveway like she was on some kind of mission. She didn't knock, didn't call out, just walked straight onto my property like she had a badge and I was trespassing on her land. Her son wasn't with her, but his attitude definitely was. Attitude definitely was. She pointed a finger at me before I even had a chance to speak. You threatened my son, she said, voice sharp. He came over here being polite and you scared him off. I was stunned. What? He came into my yard and demanded food? She didn't care? Her eyes scanned the grill, then locked back onto me with pure disgust. You people always think you're above everyone else, she muttered, loud enough that she wanted me to hear. Then she pulled out her phone and started dialing. I'm calling the police. This is harassment. I stood there, still holding my tongs, watching her speak to 911 like she was reporting a crime. Yes, I'm at address. There's a man here acting aggressively, threatening behavior. Yes, he's still here. I was still in the same spot I'd been standing in for the last 30 minutes. The police pulled up faster than I expected. One car, two officers. She waved them down like she was rescuing them from danger. She immediately pointed at me, her voice growing louder, dramatic. That's him. That's the man who threatened my son and refused to leave. I didn't move, didn't speak. I waited for the officers to approach, and when they did, I calmly reached into my wallet, pulled out my badge, and held it up. They paused. One of them recognized the emblem instantly. He asked for my version of the story, and I gave it. Short, clear, factual. The other officer turned to Karen, who by now was starting to look less confident. Her arms were crossed tighter, her voice suddenly less sharp. She tried to explain herself again, but now she was fumbling. Her words weren't landing the same way. Her son had reappeared by then, standing awkwardly near their garage, trying not to be seen but clearly watching everything unfold. I saw him catch a glimpse of the badge in my hand. The way his face dropped told me everything I needed to know. The bravado was gone. The arrogance deflated. All that attitude from earlier, it had nowhere to go now that the truth was out. Ask ChatGPT, there's something people don't tell you about moving into HOA neighborhoods. Sure, the brochures talk about security, cleanliness, community standards. They leave out the part about power-hungry board members, nosy neighbors who act like they're deputy sheriffs, and the silent rules that apply only to certain people. I learned that lesson fast on a day that started with barbecue smoke and ended with blue and red lights flashing on my driveway. It was a Sunday afternoon. I just finished settling into my new home after a long week of unpacking. I wanted one simple thing, to enjoy my backyard and cook myself a meal. I set up my grill, turned on a small Bluetooth speaker with some classic R&B, and started seasoning the chicken. And don't lie to me. He told me everything. You were aggressive. You were threatening. And frankly, I don't like your tone. She pulled out her phone. At first, I thought she was calling her husband or maybe taking a picture to send to that HOA. Then I heard the words, yes, I'd like to report a suspicious individual in the neighborhood. He's acting aggressive, won't leave the area, and he's making me feel unsafe. She was calling the police on me for standing in my own backyard grilling food. I knew better. I watched her pace as she kept describing the situation like I was some threat to the community. When the officer arrived, she waved him down dramatically, pointing toward me like she had caught a criminal in the act. The officer walked toward me with caution. I waited until he was close enough, then calmly reached into my back pocket, pulled out my wallet, and showed him my badge. He paused, read it, looked back up at me. His entire demeanor changed in an instant, from suspicion to recognition, from uncertainty to understanding. He asked me for a quick rundown of what happened. I gave it to him plainly. No emotion, just facts. While we spoke, I noticed her standing behind him, arms crossed, lips pressed into a tight line. The confidence she had just moments ago had started to unravel. Her son had come back outside too, lingering near the porch, eyes wide. They both watched the conversation unfold, realizing slowly that things weren't going the way they thought they would. The officer glanced back at her, then back at me. He nodded, clearly piecing together what had actually happened. She opened her mouth to speak again, but nothing came out at first. Then she tried to shift the story, saying maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe her son had exaggerated. Maybe emotions just ran high. The fear in her voice was subtle, but it was there. The way her posture changed, the way she looked at the badge, the way her son couldn't meet my eyes anymore. When I bought the house, I knew I'd be the only person on the block who looked like me. That wasn't news. I'd been in enough rooms, enough neighborhoods to understand how that dynamic works, but I'd also worked hard for what I had. Saved, sacrificed, climbed step by step by step. That house, with its little porch and backyard grill space, represented everything I'd earned. So I moved in with my head high, determined to mind my business and let the neighbors keep their distance if that's what they preferred. The first few days were quiet. The coded language, loud and clear. He didn't say it with anger. He said it with confidence, like he thought I wouldn't do anything about it, like he believed that here in this neighborhood, he had the upper hand. I didn't respond. I wasn't about to give him the reaction he wanted. I was halfway through cooking when I heard a loud voice from the other side of the fence. Hey, smells good. What you got there? And saw a young man, maybe early 20s, standing at the edge of my yard like he'd been waiting for an invitation.